Welcome to the 40th episode of the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with your other host,
Wyatt, Carson, and today we're joined by a very special guest. My bad, I'm already screwing this up. Joined by a very special guest, Adriana Cisneros Basulto. Hi, Adriana, how are you?
I'm good. I think it was the last name. You were preoccupied about the last name.
Oh, man. I practiced this before we hit record for those of us, for those listening. I tried.
It's great to have you. We just jump right in. One of the things we talk about on the podcast a lot is people being problem solvers versus order takers. And you are a founder and entrepreneur yourself, and you have a company called Maxwell app. I guess I would just jump in and ask you the question, what problem does your company solve and why is that important?
Oh, problem solving. I love it. I love it that that's how you're positioning it. So what the problem that we solve is employee retention. So we help employers retain their most important resource, and that is their people, in particular, healthcare employers. I could talk more about later about how we do it, but at the end of the day, that is the value proposition.
Fantastic. What is it that most employers get wrong when it comes to employee retention?
Yeah, so I'll give you maybe a little bit of perspective using my own life as an example, and talk a little bit about when they get it right and the opposite, when they get it wrong. So before working in HR for over a decade, I started my career in a completely different area, which was building financial products. So no context as to what HR did or anyone that had to do anything with people and culture matters. And, great, very blessed that not a lot of complications in my life, but as my career progressed and life changed and I had more responsibilities on my plate, it became harder to manage life and work. However, my employer was able to provide me with exactly the right type of support, help that I needed at the right time. And that made it magical. Not only did it make me better at my job, it also created this sense of loyalty. So that's an example of getting it right. How employers get it wrong is that they try still to provide employers with that magical moment, make them feel valued, cared, supported, but using a very cookie cutter approach because they're constrained by budget and the complexities of offering something that's going to meet everyone's needs.
Okay, so kind of a cookie cutter approach to this retention and feeling engaged and appreciated. You're trying to get away from that cookie cutter approach. Is that right?
Yeah, you get it. Maybe for a little bit more context, because most people have not worked in HR, but most people have been, especially if you're an adult, you have been an employee at some point. In your podcast, I know that you have talked much about value propositions, right? What's the value proposition for the customer? And that's how most people think about it. There's also what it's called the employee value proposition. What are the reasons why someone chooses to work for a particular company? And yes, pay is a component of that employee value proposition. There's many other components of it. There's what's the mission of the company? Do the values that they have align with my values? Who am I going to be working with? What type of work am I going to be getting to do? And ultimately, what people want is to feel appreciated and valued and connected to all those other aspects. That's what we're solving for. How do you make that happen for everyone?
Mission and the core values of the company is often something that's so overlooked, especially when you think about an employment proposition. Like you said, you think about salary or the medical benefits or how much PTO there is. But really, I would imagine the things that keep people with you for the long term, especially as the economy could get rough, things could get harder, a business may have to tighten. What would keep them still in their seats and not just bailing when there's some troubled waters is really that core mission and things around that. How is it that some companies can really put that on the forefront of their mind, and how would you advise them to be successful in that area?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, don't get me wrong. still the primary reason why someone goes take a job is they want to be paid, right? They want to get paid and feel like they're fairly compensated. With it, along with it, another big component of it is, particularly in the US, is traditional benefits, right? I want to have health insurance or, be able to plan for retirement. That tends to be still like that's core. But I would also say it's also baseline, is what people assume that you're going to get at any place. I assume to be fairly compensated. And if I'm of a certain size, if an employer, receive benefits. So you're correct. The other portions are the ones that at the end of the day are going to retain you there, are going to keep you energized, engaged, working at your best, that feeling of connection to the mission of the company and those values. I would say there's lots of different ways of doing it. I certainly think that a lot of it comes down to making sure that the communication of what those values are and what that mission is not just happening during recruiting or during onboarding, but that it's happening consistently throughout the whole life cycle of the employee. That people understand, how is it that my job that I'm doing on the day-to-day, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter is actually connected to delivering that mission that initially attracted me, making sure that performance, the way that performance is rated, is also connected to those values. And as simple as it sounds, a lot of it comes down just also to leadership and the type of example that they set. Are they living the values? Are they also making it a priority to keep the mission at the forefront?
I'm really glad that you broke it down like that, Adriana, because I was right about to jump in to play devil's advocate about missions and values. So in the daytime, I'm a consultant. I see lots and lots of different companies, and I've seen everyone's missions and values. Most of them are just pretty letters that are on the entryway of their, corporate headquarters. And there have been, I can think of one off the top of my head, but there have been a couple that really truly live that mission and values. And to me, that was a unique thing to see. So sometimes when I hear about people talking about, our missions and values, I kind of try and secretly roll my eyes a little bit. But I love how you broke that down. The trick is, mission, values and missions. And as a consultant, I know that people hire other consultants to write those, wonderful scripts for them. And that's great. But what you said really struck. It's kind of more, it's not about the words of the missions and values. It's about the employees know that the work they're doing, that they're getting compensated for, and of course all that, but the work that they're doing adds value. They want to know that they're making a difference somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's more to the core of mission value. So I love that you broke that down, because I was about to jump in and be that naysayer.
No, you're totally right. And there's some industries in which everywhere is super important, but there's particular industries where people are driven to work there because of that. And that's why healthcare is one of the areas that we have a particular focus on. The people that work in healthcare are drawn to it because of the mission of helping other people. A lot of times they have very personal stories about a connection to the field. So it's something that, we find a lot of joy being able to support.
So if I may, I would love to discuss, because you already mentioned that you came from a very different background. And much like every interview here, I usually, online stalk them on LinkedIn. You were 11 years into finance. Mm-hmm. What, and I hope you don't take offense to the way I phrase this question. Sometimes I pour at that. You're 11 years into finance. What in the world were you thinking, where I'm going to go drop off this, build an app, and focus my time and dedication to healthcare employees and employee retention? And that feels like that's not a 180. That's a whole other universe. How did that happen?
Yeah, I would say I've always been pretty entrepreneurial. I mean, even as a little kid, I like to tell investors that my first funder was my grandma. She would, buy me the candy in bulk, and then me and my cousin would sit in front of her house and sell to the neighborhood kids candy. And we had lots of little tiny businesses and always these ideas. So always had that, kind of in my blood. And a desire to do things, build things. I've always enjoyed that. I'm the kid that taught herself how to use the sewing machine and like build lots of little things along the way. Anyway, that's been there. When I finished an MBA and I thought I wanted to do something on my own, but there wasn't anything that I was really like passionate about. There was no problem that I felt like, I really want to solve this. And, this is how I'm going to do it. So at that time, it would have been the height of the financial industry. That would have been 2007. So the combination of that I didn't have anything that I just was passionate about, and then cost opportunity. I had this really great job that was offered to me. I was like, well, I'm going to take this job and maybe I'll do this for a little while and then, I'll start something. Then the financial crisis happened. And I was one of those lucky people in the financial industry that got to keep her job. That kept me there. That was one of the reasons. But what kept me in the longer term is that I got to, in many ways, be an entrepreneur. I got to build lots of stuff from scratch, build products, led products, led projects that were cross-functional, later built departments, whole functions. So that entrepreneurial itch in many ways was scratched. So it wasn't until a few things came together that it was like, okay, this is it. This is what I want to solve. Number one, there was a problem that I could see that could be solved and I was passionate about. The second thing, I reached a point in my life in which I was also, well, if I'm not going to do it now, I might not do it ever. So that was the other aspect that came into place. And then a little bit of financial stability. That's the other one. So I shared with you like how at the beginning was cost opportunity, right? I had this really great job with benefits and pay and everything versus something that wouldn't have anything and I had no idea. Now I had an idea and also had some stability in which I could take that risk.
Was there any particular moment, and we've talked about this a few times on the podcast, where there seems to be something that happens that triggers you to make that leap and jump into the pool wholeheartedly into your entrepreneurial journey? Was there a moment for you that was like, okay, this is my moment, I'm going to go all in now? Or was it more of a gradual switch?
For me, it was more gradual. It wasn't really like a eureka moment, but there is moments in time that I can point to that were kind of those building blocks to get to that. So I shared a little bit about my own experience as an individual that had nothing to do with HR and how I had that magical moment. And I was like, yes. Then later when I was in HR, I got to see the other side of the coin. I got to think as the employer that's, that cares about retaining all of these employees. That was really hard to recruit, to onboard, to develop. And then see them leave or become stagnant, not take further risk, particular certain segments of the population. One of the moments that was kind of that building block, if you want, was sitting down. It was at the headquarters of Gallup. And at the time, they'd done several studies since then around the topic, but they were presenting on the results of why, this is pre-pandemic, by the way, why women were leaving the workplace, and what were the reasons around it and what could companies do. And I left, not to any of Gallup's fault, more like societal fault, cultural matters. I left a little bit discouraged and came over and was talking with the head of HR at the company that I worked on. I was like, this is why, this is what's happening, and we should be doing something. And he looked at me as like, I don't know what else could we be doing. Like, we're doing everything that we can on our side to make it easier. So that was another moment that I was like, it cannot be it. This cannot be the only thing that we can do. If as an employer, we were able to figure it out, how do we care for our employees in a way that allows them to stay in the workplace? Not just women, anyone, but that was kind of that eureka moment. We would be better off as an employer. So yeah, but gradual.
Odd question, just thought of. Why is retaining employees important? Why is that something that needs to be focused on in today's world?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the more generic answer, and then I'll tell you about healthcare. So I'll say this. Turnover is not necessarily bad. There should be. turnover at a company. You should see, you're going to have people that are going to come in and they're not going to really align to the values of the company, or they're not going to be, and I'm careful with this word, fit. They're not going to be the right fit. I'm careful because it's charged in some ways from like for the job, for for what they're looking in life at that moment. That's totally okay. And also there's people that are going to grow jobs. They're going to be better than that job, and there's not going to be a job for them necessarily that they can go into, but maybe they can go somewhere else, be a great ambassador for the company, and potentially come back too. You never know. So all this to say, turnover is not necessarily bad. However, if you cannot retain your workforce, the talent that you need, you are stuck in the cycle of high expenses where you're spending a lot of money bringing on people, getting their attention, saying, hey, come work for us, then onboarding them and getting them, not just onboarding like, hey, here's, welcome, and, here's your computer, etc., but the ramp up period that takes for someone to be proficient at their job at a new company, even someone that is experienced. Those that are able to maintain a good amount of retention of those type of people are just naturally going to do better. So that's the more generic one. Now, in terms of healthcare, that's something that we should all care about because guess what? Every one of us needs healthcare at some point or another. And the healthcare industry is one that has been hit really hard. It was already happening, but then COVID didn't help. There's a couple of things happening there. One, the average age of nurses and doctors is mid-50s. So many of them are in the US. Many of them are there just kind of waiting until they're going to retire. Many people in the health industry left because it was a really hard period of time. COVID to be working in that field comes with long hours. It's stressful. There's not as much flexibility as other jobs. And then the third component that adds to it is that the newer generations are not jumping into a career in healthcare as many others did in the past because of those same things. Like you can work remotely. If you're going to be dealing with patients, you're going to deal with people more often than not. Your job requires you to be present there, and it's going to come with long hours. And guess what? It could be matters of life and death versus other jobs that you can do and get paid about the same or maybe even more.
One of the subjects that we've talked about quite a bit in the podcast you just brought up there, which is remote work. I would love to get your perspective on what you're seeing in terms of different companies adopting different methods and ideologies, whether it be on-site only, hybrid, fully remote options, and how that may affect in terms of employee retention.
Yeah. Oh, it's so fun that you're asking this question. We just sent out our monthly newsletter, which if anyone wants a monthly newsletter on the top 2 topics of life, work, people, and culture, sign up for it. But we were talking about how there's been an increase of women back into the workplace. In particularly the last couple of months, it seemed like ramp up. It's like outpacing the return of men to work, which is great per the topic that we were talking about before. But one of the reasons that experts believe that's happening is because remote work, it's available. And so it allows you to better balance all of the other responsibilities that women take on their shoulders. This to say, what we get to see is a little bit of everything with the employers that we serve. Like I said, on the healthcare space is a lot less prevalent, but even there, we're seeing people do really creative things where in order to retain top talent, they're willing for the first time ever to say, okay, let's try this remote thing. You might be our first person that's going to work remote, let's say in leadership. Let's see if we can make this happen. And they're going out their way to even create, we have one employer that has created in their physical location, like a room that is specifically for other employees to be able to come there and sit down and have conversations with this individual that it's remote. But we also get to see the people that have transitioned back to being mostly in the office, and that works with their culture, and people know that that's the expectation, and they're fine. They're companies that are still able to attract that particular talent.
Yeah, one of the challenges I've been seeing a lot for people who do decide to go remote is to provide that consistent level of culture and giving that employee experience that they would normally get and foster in the office to the same to their remote employees. Are you seeing kind of similar issues, and what kind of strategies have you been seeing that have been successful for employers to actually fully incorporate remote workers and keep and retain them?
Yeah, this gives me a great segue to tell you how Maxwell works. So a little bit of context. Maybe if that's okay with you guys, I'll tell you like how Maxwell works, how we partner with employers.
That was my next question, but sure.
Oh my goodness!
No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry, Wyatt. We should have prepared better for this.
I know.
So the way that it works is an employer provides their team members with a monthly budget that is separate from their paycheck. They're not receiving it because they're performing their job. That's their salary, and they're getting on their paycheck. This budget that they're receiving is for them to be able to balance life and work and create moments of joy. And they receive it via the Maxwell app. Now, it's Maxwell is mobile first, but they can actually use a computer or a tablet to access it. Once they receive it, they get to choose how they want to spend that budget. So remember when I was talking about getting exactly what you need at the right time is magical, but it's really hard to deliver as an employer? Well, we're making that possible, right? Because now you have this budget that you get to choose how you want to spend. So they can spend it in the app. They can go to the marketplace that has life work solutions that are going to help them balance. Maybe I want grocery delivery from Instacart. So after a 12-hour shift, I don't have to go to the grocery. And that's what I need. Or maybe what's really going to be great for me is saving up to buy a pair of really comfy shoes. So those 12-hour shifts feel a little bit more comfortable. And so then I can go at point of sale, tap my Maxwell card, which is a virtual card that they download to their phone, and purchase those shoes that way. And then the third way that they can do it, that they can use that budget, is actually to send it to each other on the peer-to-peer section, and the three of us work together. And I send my, I find Wyatt, looks very much like Venmo, and I say, Wyatt, thank you for covering my shift when I couldn't make it. You're a lifesaver. Please treat yourself. I send you $20. You're going to get to choose however you want to use it. We both keep it public. Then Tanner sees it, and he is like, oh, I'm not surprised. Wyatt is amazing. Great way to go. Wyatt, you did that for me last week. Here you go, another $20. Now, I say all this because your question was, how do you keep that culture when people are remote? How do you create that connection? That is one of the ways that we help them do that. That last way that I mentioned about, be able to share in budget with your peers, is one of the ways that companies get to bring together people that do not always work at the same place or at the same time in a really tangible way. Other ways that we help employers create connection is amongst employees is in the homepage, where people are going to see how much budget do I have, what was my last transaction. There's employer announcements where, guess what? Now all of a sudden, Wyatt is there as employee of the month because he's been covering everyone's shifts. Or there is a message from the CEO with a recap of the town hall, and all these other cultural aspects that, again, tie to mission and values. That's the way us at Maxwell help employers create that connectivity.
So I'm going to put on like a manager or owner hat and say, well, that sounds great, but you're talking about extra money and budgeting, all these other stuff. I'm sure you've kind of figured out the costs of your product and how much that probably saves over. But what is kind of the numbers of investing proactively rather than being reactive and having to replace people?
Yeah, of course, it depends a little bit on the industry and the type of role that you're talking about. But at large, I would say, implementing something like Maxwell is going to cost them 1% of the cost that they would have if people turn over. So for context, the average cost of an employee turning over is 33% of their salary. Once you take into account the fact that you're going to have to recruit, the time that they're going to have to ramp up, business lost around that time, potentially, other work the other one's going to have to take on their shoulders, etc. So, yeah, that is the cost.
So Maxwell sounds pretty awesome, and I am a hardcore work from home guy. Tanner and I have had this discussion a million times because Tanner works from home, but Tanner is much more extroverted. He likes, going into the office. He drives to Omaha all the dang time, which is like 5 hours away, just to come to the office and visit his coworkers. And I've met like 4 people at my company, but so this app sounds amazing. And I keep thinking, oh man, this would be cool to have, but I still, what are you finding in the healthcare industry that how are they responding to this? Because I can also see groups of, say, nurses who, they spend so much time together. They are always in a group, and many nurses and medical personnel in my family, and I hear them talk about it. They're their own families, so I could see the social aspect of it. How are they responding in the healthcare industry to something like this? Because this is pretty next level. This is a new thing. I think it's impressive, but what's the feedback you're getting?
Yeah, no, the feedback is great. I mean, we have the data to show that Maxwell really does work. I mean, we increase retention by 9% over a 12-month period in the healthcare industry specifically. Mm-hmm. Yes, you are correct. Nurses do get to see each other. But even then, you don't get to see each other all the time, particularly with nurses' schedules. If you're talking about a hospital or even some other settings, mm-hmm. If you think about it, you're not always there at the same time because you work certain amount of shifts and then you're off. Sure. And then the other thing is the people that you would consider your department is not necessarily the people that you always see. A couple of things to note about, and it sounds like you have family in healthcare, so I'm sure you can vouch to this. For those that are watching or listening, chances are that you are on a computer and that a lot of your work, you do it on a computer like I do, and I leave on my email, and it's a very different type of work than if you're a nurse or if you're a doctor or if you're the maintenance person at a healthcare employer. You are not on a computer. You're mostly with patients. You're mostly have to be physically present, taking care of them. There might be moments where you go to a computer to input some data or a tablet, but that's not how you're performing your work. So at this point, most of the ways that employers across industries, but in healthcare, deliver information around the benefits that you have, or messages that qualify for culture or values connection is through an intranet site, something that gets posted on the wall. Again, seems like very archaic. Mm-hmm. Who wants to go home or stay at the end of the shift and then log into your computer to see okay, now let me check who's getting rewards or the message from, the CEO. But everyone, even across socioeconomic groups, there's at least one person that has a phone that is smart. And that's how they can interact with it at their own leisure, at their own time. So yeah, get very, very good response. For context, we get 93% utilization. So
wow, that's impressive.
Wow. So we've had quite a few startup founders on our podcast previously, and I'd really love for you to get down into some of the specifics of your entrepreneurial story from, mm-hmm. Kind of building the app, maybe some of the financing aspects going out. I'm not sure if you've dealt much with investment, things like that, mm-hmm. but I'm really interesting to hear how you kind of got this all put together and ramped up.
Yeah. Trying to think what key pieces to focus on to not ramble on. Okay, so yeah, like I said, I had these kind of building up eureka moments when I finally was like, okay, I think this is something. So I decided, number one, I gave myself a deadline. I said, okay, by this date on, I think it was like March of 2019, something like that. March 2019, I will leave to figure this out, because I knew if I didn't, then I would continue to get engaged in other things. I'm just a person that, loves creating things. There would be something else that would keep me there working in corporate. So I did that. I left, and a lot of my journey was initially customer validation. Now I'm lucky that I had that background in HR, so I was able to do consulting on people and culture matters at my own pace, at my own time, while I still was trying to figure out what is Maxwell going to look like. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, which looks completely different to what it looks today. So it was figuring out, getting together with the network of people that I knew in the HR space and saying, hey, I have this idea. What do you think? Could this be something? What am I missing? And then lots of customer validation with potential users too. So leaders at employers, even users. I was very, very lucky that at the time Omaha had active the startup collaborative. So I was able, to be part of their program and get guidance that way and meet other founders that were further ahead than me. And then I had things pretty lined up to starting something in February of 2020. So, which we all know what happened in March of 2020.
Bad
so yeah. And so I was meeting with employers at that time. I had a couple of ones that were willing to pilot, and then the pandemic hit. And if we think that it was hard, try to be a leader in HR where you are trying to keep everyone safe, keep the company still open. Like, what are we even supposed to do? Everything's changing so rapidly. So it was really hard to get people's attention at that time, but managed to pilot a very much smaller pilot than what I intended originally in the fall of 2020. So fall of 2020 to January of 2021. And that was good enough to see this could be something. This has legs. This is a solution. We just need to tweak this, and this, and modify it. So that was the first part.
Did you have a team at that point, or were you outsourcing to different developers just to get some of your MVP built?
No. So at that time, it was just me. And then there's a few things that I said that was so the right decision. I'm so happy I did it. And this is one of them. One of the decisions that I made was to build it with no code. I was like, okay, I think I can do this. For background, I also, working in corporate, one of the last things that I did was help the company I was at transition from 7 HR systems into a single HCM. So I didn't do it like with development. I wasn't the only one working on it, but I was working in a core component, like kind of the foundational aspect of how the data is going to work with each other and what are the implications of the decisions that we make. So that type of thinking is not foreign to me. Like I understand that. So it was a matter of just learning how to use the no code tools to put that into place. So it wasn't as pretty as it is now, but it was a good MVP to get started.
That's music to our ears, because we've talked about no code, low code so many times, because everyone feels like there's some barrier, like, oh, I'm not technical, I can't get this going myself. And then, those tools are available. So it's so cool that you use those and actually got off the ground using them.
Oh, and you can get so far. We got so far with no code. Like we got, and when I say we, because eventually, I found my co-founder, we met, and we were able to go even further, like more than people realize that you can do with no code and low code. But then I guess kind of following the journey on there, I got, and please stop me with questions, because otherwise I'll give you my life history. So then so this was now it was 2021. The pandemic was still going on. People were still mostly at their houses, particularly in the winter in Nebraska. And Clubhouse was all the rage. And so I was in a room of Nebraska founders, and I don't even remember what I was talking about, but my co-founder, Steven, was in the room too, listening. And something that I said about life and work and changing the workplace, creating better workplaces, he liked it. And he was looking to come back into the startup world. That was his first job right out of college, had been with a startup, but then he had moved on to that and done lots of other things. And he was looking to come back to it after doing some data science education. And so he looked me up on LinkedIn and connected with me and said, hey, I really like what you had to say on Clubhouse. This is what I think. And I was like, who's this guy? And so, and I have so much respect for people that have the courage to reach out to others and say like, hey, I care about this, or do you have a job? Or like, here's my skill set. Like, I have a lot of respect for that. It takes a lot of courage. So I replied back and I was like, oh, that's great to hear. Here's what I think. And then I was like, hey, do you want to have virtual coffee? And so then while he was trying to get back in the startup world, I knew that I couldn't do it by myself. I was like, this is a lot of work. And I feel like I'm just talking to myself. And I'm just like, what do you think? Should we do this? Well, I don't know. Like, and so I was like, I need someone else here, and a complementary skill set. And so we really hit it off. Initially, he came just working on contract. And then very quickly it became indispensable. And I asked him if he want to, have a little skin in the game and, come be a part of it. When I realized that, coming back to values again, that our values were very aligned, and that our skill sets and backgrounds were really complementary.
Part of my LinkedIn stalking, I came across something that piqued my attention, because this is something I'm also pretty passionate about, is your experience in change management. And I love change management. I think it's a phenomenal tool set and adds value to anyone who is willing to take the time to listen. So but as I'm hearing how Maxwell works, how you came to it, your personal values, it seems like a very easy transition to take something that you found impactful, which is feeling valued and appreciated at your work, your skill set in change management, knowing how to lead an organization into something that could be very different. And I think we're all in alignment that COVID was a paradigm shifting event in the workforce, especially in healthcare. Absolutely. So how does one go about, and convincing is the wrong word, but I can't think of a better one at the moment. How do you present this to a company in the sense that this is going to make your life better, this is going to help your retention, and what are some of the obstacles you're facing in that field of getting new customers, of getting new clients with that?
Well, Wyatt, it sounds like you might know a little bit about change management, so this is not going to be news to you. But it depends on the stakeholder that we're talking to. The different stakeholders or different personas in the startup world care about different things. So it depends who we're talking with. If we're talking with their HR team, usually what we are talking about, yes, they have very clear to be like, for them it's very clear why increasing retention is good. And they also have very clear the amount of time that they're spending trying to make employees feel valued. They're doing like, let's do a pizza party and let's, give this person a gift card and all of these things that are well intended, but they just don't have the long-term impact or connection to the rest of the employee value proposition. So that's typically what we talk about with them. If we're talking, for example, with a CFO or someone that is more finance oriented, then what we talk about, particularly in healthcare, it's about reducing margin compression, and how reallocating some of those resources that they have been putting in these non-impactful in the long-term avenues for caring for employees is going to create impact and is going to help them decompress, create less margin compression there. So that's the way that we're going about it there. Sometimes we meet with people that are a little bit more, thinking two other things that they care about. One is more on the analysis side of things. So people that care about the data. And then we get to talk about some of the things that I didn't share right now with our solution. But besides the user component, there is the HR view component. HR administrators are able to see aggregate data. This is really powerful data that otherwise they don't have access to, of what is it really that is making their employees tick. Now, they don't get to see Tanner use his budget specifically this way, but they do get to see Tanner receive his budget and he used it, or he used this amount, and they get to see at an aggregate, these are the categories of spend like that are most used. They can dice it also by segments of the population. So they can see it by gender, they can see it by race, ethnicity, by caregivers. And that's one of the areas where we're building more and more. So that's the other ways that we get to talk about with them. And then the last one is if we're talking with people that have a heavy emphasis on increasing the diversity of their company, of creating a more inclusive workforce, then that's what we lean on. We lean on how this helps precisely with that. Because Maxwell can serve the needs not only from a socioeconomic standpoint, right, which that's the primary one, like from the person that's cleaning the floors, all the way to your anesthesiologist or, your neurologist, because they get to choose. So yeah, it depends on who is it that we're talking to.
I think, and your blurb earlier about roughly 1% of the cost of employee churn is incredibly impactful, but also I didn't realize about the HR dashboard. I mean, the ability to develop employee intelligence and not invasive intelligence, but knowing who your employees are as a group. Gosh, yeah, that's really cool. I love that HR dashboard idea. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Employers do have a lot of data. A lot of times, though, the data is not necessarily structured or orchestrated in such a way that it's actionable. And that's what we are doing, right? Like we get it to a point that it's not in isolation. You still have to have knowledge of your business, but that can help you then either dig a little bit deeper to make decisions. And then eventually the goal is to get to the point that we can also do some predictive analysis before it even becomes an issue.
Love it.
So to circle back just a little bit, you found your co-founder and you started getting everything built. Can you go through kind of the next stages? I'd love to hear about your journey through Techstars, actually getting the app out and launched and into the world. Yeah, and I just realized I never mentioned my co-founder's name. My co-founder's name is Steven. So, hey, Steven, if you watch this. And he's great. He's an awesome human being, and I'm very, very lucky to have him as a co-founder. So it was Steven and I for a period of time. Then it wasn't all funding all at the same one. We got some commitment from Invest Nebraska. Oh, actually, let me back it up. I can't believe that I didn't mention this. Because they have been very instrumental. Yes, we went with no code originally, but then we applied for the prototype grant, and the prototype grant, it's been invaluable. It's so good. We're so lucky to have that in our state. So we knew that we had that money to then, when we needed to transition, when we were ready to transition to a coded version, we could do it. Okay. So anyway, I didn't want to forget that. Then Invest Nebraska, they saw it. They're like, yes, we get it, and we're willing to back you. You just need to match it. We're willing to invest this much if you can match it. Now, it took us a little while. It wasn't right away. And in hindsight, I look back and I realized, yeah, we probably were not explaining it the right way or totally ready for, going out and getting funds. So took a moment, then we decided to participate on GBeta, or InMotion, which is a pre-accelerator. That was really useful because it allowed us to see, okay, these are the places, where we could be a little bit more succinct, or we could explain it better. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Think about everything that I had to explain right now. Right. I was just going to ask, what was some of the evolution of the message from original to where you're at now?
Well, the first thing is just starting being a little bit clearer that it's about employee retention. And then now that we focus on healthcare, it's also easier for people to see oh, okay, I get it. Versus then we weren't as clear on who were we starting with as a beachhead or potentially as a long-term market. And the other is because there's so many parts of it, which, by the way, is the reason why Maxwell works, is because it's not just recognition, or it's not just and lifestyle spending benefit is all the connectivity. But the way that we were explaining it for someone that has never worked in HR, which most investors haven't, it is hard to comprehend. So it was getting the message, tighter. So we did that. G-Beta does not come with investment. But then we were able to raise funds from 3 places that matched the investment from Invest Nebraska. One was from the Husker Venture Fund, which, yay, UNL. The second one was family and friends. And then the remainder of the capital was Techstars. One other thing to mention that G-Beta was great for was that we met our current maven of engineering, which is John. He was their participant on G-Beta on a different venture. And that's when we met. So he also worked at that time for, why am I blanking on their name right now? It's going to come back to me. But for a development firm that's out of Grand Island. And so we really liked them. We liked them a lot. And so we were ready to move to code. So we engaged with them and said, hey, would you help us get it into the coded version? Now that we're ready to do it. And then eventually, I wouldn't say we snatched him, but we invited John to be part of the team. And, and he was excited to do that. And now he's part of the team. Right on time for us to participate on Techstars too, which we participate on Techstars at the beginning of the year. So in January of 23. So
you're 3.5 years in. You are an HR Tech award-winning company now.
Mm-hmm.
And congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Are you near or at where you saw yourself 3.5 years ago? And I know you mentioned that Maxwell went through different kind of iterations and it kind of transformed as it goes. I was kind of wondering, what feedback did you get that changed your direction? And are you feeling comfortable where you're at 3.5 years later? I love saying that, 3.5 years. I don't know.
3.5 sounds good, huh? Well, first and foremost, I would say we like to say that officially Maxwell has existed for 2 years. So in this format, but my journey, my personal journey, yes, you're right. It started a while back. Am I where I thought that I was going to be? No, you always want to move way faster. You always think I'm going to have so much done. We're going to have so many more customers and, all of that. No. So we would think that I don't know, way, way further. But it's great. I've learned that that's not uncommon. I learned that other founders feel the exact same way. And I learned that that's the reason that made me good at my job at corporate, but that also the reason that made me bad for corporate, because I like to move a lot faster than large organizations do. So no, still a lot to go. There's still so many things that we want to do. And I'm always like, oh, we should be doing this. And what about that? And, we just released a feature that we had been working on that allows people, the HR team, to deploy spot bonuses instantaneously. And people receive them for lots of different reasons. It could be tied to values, and we're working on another one that's deploying here fairly soon, in which now, as a manager or anyone that you deem in the company can also have a wallet that is not their budget, is the budget of the company, to deploy spot bonuses, which is something that goes unused a lot in companies. So yes, there's always all these things. In terms of how it has changed, because I think that was the second part of your question, if I remember correctly, there's been a few things. So one of them that I should have known right away, but I don't know why I didn't think about it, is the fact that it needs to connect to traditional benefits. So one of the other problems that exist in the total reward space, so the space where people think about how do you compensate people, how do you make them feel, how do you offer them benefits, all those things, is that traditional benefits like healthcare, retirement, even voluntary ones like dental and vision, most people think about those. People want them. People are like, that's baseline. You must provide me with that. But they really care about them when they're looking for a job, when they onboard, and then they sort of forget that your company is investing quite a bit on you through those benefits. And how most employers go about making sure that employees know what they have. Gee, if they're sophisticated, they have an intranet site that lists them. Or maybe it's in their payroll system has a section that lists your traditional benefits, which, by the way, most people don't go to their payroll system because most payroll systems now send you a notification, like an email or a text message that says, hey, your paycheck's on its way. So you don't even have to go there. And then if you're not sophisticated, then it was probably like a handbook or something that they gave you physically. And then you forget about it. So that was one big change. It was like, okay, we have an opportunity here to help employees remember those. And HR teams really care about that. So that's another section of the app. It's called Benefits Plus, where employees are able to see, I have healthcare. Or my company offers, I should say that. My company offers healthcare. My company offers retirement. And you can quickly see there, oh, this is what I have for dental. How do I learn more and click on it and be able to get redirected to MetLife or whoever it is that you have?
Yeah. So now you have this ability to see your total compensation package in one snapshot, plus this additional benefit of potential spot bonuses. This is really cool. Wonderful.
Yeah, as someone who was self-employed for so many years, and it is so true how much benefits and everything actually do cost. And you forget about that 100%. You just think of what's my take-home pay, and that's the only number that you really put in there. So when you start having that little bit of discontent, perhaps, then you're just focusing on, well, I only need to make X, which is your base thing, but you completely forget about, pre-tax. If you think about that, then you're also not thinking about PTO, healthcare, dental, 401k matches, and all these other things that you just don't even really come into your conscious, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess our final kind of question that we always like to talk to when we have different founders on is, what advice would you give to somebody wanting to kind of maybe take that leap to become an entrepreneur? Maybe they're just fresh out of college looking at starting something. Maybe they're in their corporate job and they've been itching for a while and they want to kind of take that leap themselves. You mentioned how Nebraska itself is such a amazing place to build your startup. And I would 100% agree. There's so many established ways of getting grants and funds, but there's also some really cool new ones coming out over the next year or so too. What advice would you give to somebody, and why should they start their business here in Nebraska?
The first one I would say is, don't feel like you have to do it all on your own. Like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That there's a lot of people that have gone ahead of you that are going to be willing to sit down and have a cup of coffee or point you in the right direction. And luckily enough, there's enough events, like there's been a resurgence of events for founders that are happening across the state. And even just pick up people on LinkedIn. Most people are very willing to chat and give you their perspective. So that would be the first one. The second would be beyond the state of Nebraska and the founders that exist in Nebraska. There's a lot of resources out there. It can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes, everything that you can find online, but I think it does pay to actually learn a little bit. I know, like, I'm like, oh, gosh, I should have learned that before. Like, why did I wait so long for some things along the way? I already talked about no code. I definitely think, at least for us, it was the way to go. It's a great way to test things. I sometimes meet people that are looking to start things and they're worried already about like the best case scenario, like, and I totally understand it, like the best case scenario, but like, what if I land this really large client? And like, I'm like, and someone gave me an advice at some point that was like, if that happens, I hope you have that problem 20 times. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. So that would be the other one. And then the last one I would say, this is a very, very personal one. For me, it's key that it's something that I'm passionate about. If I wasn't passionate about what I am doing, it would be really, I don't know. I don't know how people do it if you're not passionate about what you're solving for, because it is super fun and it's also super painful along the way. And to do it with people that you trust, that you're aligned, that can support you, not just co-founders or teammates, but also the people that surround you. Like, I am so thankful for my husband and my kids and my parents and my extended family, that along the way, they all have played a role also in making Maxwell happen.
Wonderful. Well, Adriana, you are a very passionate, very intelligent person. Your career speaks volumes. I find myself really impressed with you. This has been the most fun LinkedIn stalking I've done in a long time.
I love it.
But tell us, where can people learn more about Maxwell? Where can people find you and learn more?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, come over to our website. That's www.maxwell.app. So there you can see a little bit about us. Ping me on LinkedIn. I do answer to anyone that, messages me. Particularly, it might take a little bit longer if you're selling me something. But if you just want to connect, that's a great way to do it too. You can also follow us on Instagram. If you're more of an Instagram follower, we're at maxwell.apphq, or follow us on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to everyone who's listened. We hope you're still here, and if you are, make sure to go reach out and say hello. I love that line that you were saying about how most people, it's scary to do so. So if you are, that's one of the biggest leaps that you can do, and you don't have to start a podcast to actually do it. So that's one of the big things.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll see everybody next week. Bye.